So San Jose State had a roller coaster of an offseason, and it all starts with the guy in charge, the head coach. They lost Brett Brennan to Arizona, and then they hired Ken Niumatalolo. What can you tell us about Coach Niumatalolo and what he brings to the table for San Jose State?
I mean, to start off, he brings a lot of head coaching experience. I believe he was at Navy for 15 years. And, being a coach at Navy, that comes with a lot of discipline. I mean, that's one of his big things. And as well as he values like that family feeling with the team. And that's something he's preached since day one. And the experience thing, I know that's something our athletic director, Jeff Konya, wanted. According to ESPN, once Brent Brennan announced he was leaving, that was like the coaching search. They were looking for someone with experience, and they got someone with experience. But yeah, Coach Ken, he's really disciplined, familial feeling. But all the players have said so far that he's such a nice guy at the same time. Like he knows when to put his foot down, but at the same time, he does it in a really nice way. And another thing of note that's kind of interesting that players have brought to my attention is he also doesn't cuss and encourages his coaching staff not to cuss as well. Something you don't normally see in a college coaching staff, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So as typical, when the head coach leaves, you usually lose most, if not all, the assistants. And San Jose State kind of, and it falls in that same boat with the offensive coordinator. So they hired Craig Stutzman to come in and run the San Jose Spartan offense and install his spread and shred offense is kind of what he calls it, which for a lot of folks that maybe just, hearing them hire Coach Niumatalolo, just immediately think like, oh no, we're going to the triple option.
Yeah.
And that's and this is like the complete opposite of the triple option. This offense that Craig Stutzman is going to trying to install here. But what can you tell our listeners that may not be familiar about this offense?
Yeah, so to start off, like you said, everybody's reaction here was, "Oh no, triple option. Is that going to work here?" But then we see the hiring of Craig Stutzman and that spread and shred. And from my understanding, just talking to Craig Stutzman about it, spread and shred is kind of derived from that air raid offense and the
Run and shoot.
Run and shoot, exactly. Yeah, and he also. I expect a lot of like option routes with the wide receivers and stuff like that, and that's kind of what I've also talked to some of the quarterbacks about too, and they enjoy throwing in this offense because it's a pass heavy offense. So even though it's a pass heavy offense, I also like to say they did emphasize they are going to run the ball too. Coach Craig told me that he's actually previously learned under Packers head coach Matt LaFleur, and so he wants to take some concepts from that Shanahan, LaFleur, McVay offense style when it comes to the run game of things. But of course, it's still based in that spread and shred, run and shoot offense. So yeah, a lot of passing, air raid. I think it's going to be exciting for Spartan fans to watch. Those quarterbacks sling the ball.
Yeah, when Coach Stutzman was the head coach, I think it was at Utah Tech.
Mm-hmm.
They had a 1,000-yard rusher. And I don't know if ironic thing is the right word, but it was Quayle Conley, right? Who was at San Jose State. We'll get to him in a little bit, but he's transferred away. But so yeah, it definitely seems like he definitely is. He definitely looks to include the running game and not solely just pass around, but they do throw it around a lot as well. Let's get to the position where it all starts on offense, and that is the quarterback. They lose a really good quarterback and last year's starter, Siobhan Cordero. He graduates. But they returned Jay Butterfield and Walker Eggett, and they bring in transfer Emmett Brown coming over from Washington State. By all accounts, early on, this was I think a 5 or 6 man quarterback race. But then as spring practice went on, it kind of narrowed it down to 2 folks vying for that spot in Emmett Brown and Walker Eggett. What can you kind of tell us about the quarterback competition in the spring and how those guys looked?
Yeah, so it was kind of surprising. A lot of Spartan fans were looking at Jay Butterfield thinking he was going to be the next.
Yeah.
He got a lot of those garbage time reps last season when Brent Brennan was the head coach. So when that first came out and when Coach Ken and Coach Craig both told me that, Emmett and Walker, everybody was a little surprised. But just talking about those 2 quarterbacks, first off, Emmett, Washington State transfer, he's a little on the short side, but I will say he can throw the ball. He did have a really nice play at the spring ball game. He threw about a 60-yard ball. Not the ball 60-yard, but it was a really big pass that was a 60-yard play. And then also Walker Eggett, he's more of a traditional style quarterback, I'd say. Stand in the pocket, and he's tall on the taller side. Both of them was I was kind of surprised myself. Another person that I thought was going to be in this race more was Anthony Garcia, but I kind of found out he wasn't, and then he ended up transferring to Arizona following Brent Brennan. But yeah, and then like I said about Emmett Brown, he was also a more dual threat quarterback in a sense. It sounds like he can use his legs a little bit more than Walker. But in my opinion, I will say I think Walker is in the lead just based off the spring game because he got more of the reps, most of the reps. He went out with the ones, and he got a little bit more than Emmett, but Emmett definitely got the second most reps. But that's just my opinion. That's not according to the coaches. Coaches say
Absolutely.
otherwise.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's hard. I feel like sometimes coaches feel like, to me, especially when it comes to quarterbacks, they're in one and two boats. They're either very brutally honest, and then you see guys leave because they're so honest, or they keep things very close to the vest because they don't want guys to leave, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, can certainly appreciate that.
And another thing I wanted to mention about the quarterbacks real quick is Coach Ken said that they will be looking in the transfer portal to see and open to competition from someone in the transfer portal too. He did say that after the spring game. So that's another, you never know, who can come in here.
Especially in this day and age.
Yeah, it seems like, yeah.
Moving over to the running game, which was a strength of the 2023 team, they lose Kyrie Robinson to graduation, and we talked about Quayle Conley earlier, transferring to Arizona, but they return Jabari Bates and Caden Collins, and they also bring in Floyd Chalk IV from Grambling State. How did that group look in the spring?
That group was really interesting. I think there was two leaders essentially. It seemed like Floyd Chalk was the leader at first, but then on the day of the spring game, Jabari Bates got the 1 reps, but I will say both of them got a lot of even reps. And along with Caden Collins, he did get some reps too, but it was mainly Floyd Chalk and Jabari Bates. And so I would guess you could say Jabari Bates is kind of the running back one because he went out with the ones. But yeah, and that's someone Coach Kenny Matalolo in the week leading up to the spring game told me. He said he's probably surprised me the most and impressed me the most with Jabari Bates, which kind of caught me off guard because I originally remember hearing Floyd Chalk was that guy. And there are two different backs. Floyd Chalk's a little bigger. I guess you could say more physical compared to Jabari Bates, who's a smaller size. But yeah.
If you had to take a guess, how do you think it kind of works out? In the fall, do you think it's going to be like a committee approach where they're both going to kind of get, somewhat maybe even playing time or 60-40 playing time? Or do you think maybe there'll be a workhorse guy and they'll just ride that one guy?
Honestly, I think Floyd Chalk is going to be, maybe I'll say 60-40. Okay. Just based off what they did at the spring game, it seemed like they were switching every other drive when they were on offense. Well, and so maybe I'll say 60-40. I guess Floyd Chalk's going to get more of the reps just because of his build. He seems like more physical when he runs the ball. And obviously they weren't fully tackling that game. Sure. So I can't really say for sure, but just off their build, I think Jabari Bates is someone who's more quick, shifty, but he's also the smaller advantage. So I would worry a little bit myself, but if I was the coach picking that. But yeah, I'm not too sure, but I'm going to guess 60-40.
With Chalk moving up from the FCS to the FBS, did he look like an FBS ready player to you? Or
actually, yeah, I mean, he took the running back room by storm. I remember talking early on when he got here to the coaches and even himself, and he was excited to be here. And he was originally getting the reps with the ones at practice, if I remember correctly. And he was kind of like in the drills. He was the leader of the room. It looked like he was the first one to do all the drills that they were doing with the running backs. So, it's hard to say if he's FBS ready till he really goes out there and plays, but
he didn't look out of place like during practice or anything.
No, he looked like he fit in.
Awesome. Okay. Let's go over to the passing game because as we said, in the spread and shred offense, they're going to throw the ball a ton. But they get a boost with Nick Nash returning and then Justin Lockhart coming back after missing the 2023 season due to injury. But they do lose Charles Ross and Isaac Jernigan. They also bring in Trayshawn Hurry coming over in the transfer portal coming from Weber State. How did this room shape up during the spring?
Yeah, it seems like a bit of a mishmash deal. There's still not too much clarity yet with the wide receiver room, other than the fact that Nick Nash is like the clear leader. That's what all the coaches said. I believe he's in his 5th or 6th year. I might be wrong, but he And another thing interesting about Nick Nash is he hopped in the transfer portal, and the next day he came back. So he took it out. Yeah, took his name out. But yeah, he is definitely someone who's been a clear leader in that room, and all the coaches have said, and he's getting the reps with the ones. Of course, he's like the leader. Yeah, that's who I would say.
How is Justin Lockhart's recovery coming along, and when do they expect him to kind of be ready?
Yeah, they're not too clear on that. I mean, from what I've seen at practice, at first he was on the sidelines with the wide receivers, not doing the drills. And then he started to slowly build up, and maybe at first he was start to run the routes but not catch anything. And before the spring game, he was starting to like catch a few balls, but he did not play. So he's coming along, but I'm not too estimated. I don't have an estimate of when he's going to be ready.
Gotcha. In this offense, you know, they have outside receivers and slot receivers. Any kind of indication, like who the outside guys are? We know that Nash and Lockhart and even Hurry, you know, in the past were primarily outside guys.
Yeah.
Are they going to move one of those guys to the slot to try to get all three of them on the field, or someone else going to play the slot?
I'm not too sure, honestly. A lot of different wide receivers got reps. I feel like that was the group that got the most at spring game. I mean, maybe a guy like Cooper Hosh, number 15, I think he got a lot of reps.
And he was a walk-on, right?
Yeah, he's a walk-on, and he might be one of those guys. Malachi Miller, but I'm not too sure yet either on that.
In the past, tight ends were used quite a bit at San Jose State. However, in this new spread and shred offense, they aren't. In the past, they haven't really been used. But we saw numerous reports this offseason where the coaches kind of commented on how talented the tight end room was, and that they needed to find a way to get them more involved in the offense. Now, mind you, all these comments were made before Sam Olsen recently departed and entered the transfer portal. But with given his departure, what can you tell us about this tight end room? And do you think they're still going to try and find a way to get tight ends involved, or?
It sounds like yes, they are going to try to get tight ends involved. What Coach Ken was telling me, he said, don't expect them as much as last season with that offense. But I know Skylar Loving Black is a guy they're looking at as the next tight end. But he also told me that's another position they're going to look at in the transfer portal. But he made it sound like they were going to be semi-involved. But I wouldn't expect too much out of that position group, just based off the offense and the scheme.
Yeah. That's kind of was my takeaway. It was just interesting to hear them kind of talk about that in the off season in terms of getting them involved, and then by the tight end turns around and leaves. That kind of, to me, that is a little bit of an indication that maybe they weren't going to be used a whole lot to begin with.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too.
The offensive line also takes a hit this offseason, losing 4 of 5 starters and a top backup. What did the Spartans do this offseason to kind of shore up the offensive line, and how did they look in the spring?
Yeah, so what I heard, a big thing was the hiring of John Estes. I've heard nothing but good things about his as offensive line coach. And another thing is, I don't think they have attracted too many guys in transport or anything yet. I think they're just going off of what they had last year. And one name that kept coming up was Marist Talavo, I think is how you say his name, but they kept saying Mars. He's been that main presence. And I mean, well, from what it sounds like is they feel pretty confident in their O-line of the guys that they had behind those guys last year. So the starters. So yeah.
All right. With this brand new offense, a lot of changes coming on. If you had to pick an offensive player to have a breakout type season in the fall, who would that be?
Yeah, my choice was actually going to be Floyd Chalk. I think the running game is going to be a surprising strength. I mean, not necessarily surprising strength, but yeah, I think the spread offense is going to do wonders for him. And you could say Jabari Bates too. I think the running game in general, both those running backs who are going to get that big load, it looks like this year, I would expect them to get a lot of yards and maybe even touchdowns, more than we expect with this offense, just because of the spread offense. They'll have more holes with the O-line. So yeah, that's who I'm going with.
Spartan Nation on